doing? And before I get into my experience with the Booktube Prize Octafinals, I wanted to say, hey, I know it's been a while. I've been kind of busy, and then the books I've been reading have been for the Booktube Prize because I haven't had a lot of spare time, and so I haven't really filmed because I felt like I couldn't share anything. But now I can, so I hope you guys are staying safe and not sick with everything that's going on. And for those of you working at home, I hope you're enjoying it. It's actually quite a luxury. It's a luxury I don't have because I work in a hospital, and I know a lot of other people who have to be out and around people don't have, or even worse, the people who are without a job. So heart goes out to you guys who don't have jobs right now. But the Booktube Octafinals was finished on the 30th, and he announced the winners on the 31st. Shout out to Robert. He's done an amazing work. So I think I'm going to get into my predictions for... I judged Group G of the nonfiction prize. And so when I saw the list, I had looked at the list, and I basically kind of, looked at the book and said, okay, I think I'm going to like these. So I had my predicted order, then I had my actual order, and then there's the three that got to move on. So I think I'm going to flow in that process. I hate those little things, but you kind of need them to hang up a shirt, Anyways, so the one that I thought I was going to like the most is The Ice at the End of the World, An Epic Journey into Greenland's Buried Past and Perilous Future by Jon Gertner. And I'm going from what I thought I was most going to like to least going to like. Then it would have been Savage Appetites, 4 True Stories of Women, Crime, and Obsession by Rachel Monroe. The Ungrateful Refugee by Dina Nayeri. 5 Days Gone, The Mystery of My Mother's Disappearance as a Child by Laura Cumming. I think this has a different title in the UK. No Visible Bruises, What We Don't Know About Domestic Violence Can Kill Us by Louise Snyder. And How to Be Antiracist by Ibram X. Kendi. Okay, so this is the order that I thought I was going to like them in. Let's get into my actual thoughts. And I think I'm going to go from what I liked the least to the greatest. So this is going to go opposite of the predictions. Okay. So in 6th place was actually The Ungrateful Refugee, What Immigrants Never Tell You by Dina Nayeri. This book was an extremely frustrating read because... So the author is sharing her own experience and then also the experiences of other people. And I feel like I would have liked the book if it was just her collecting other people's experience. But she also shares her own experience and her own opinions, although she states a lot of these things as fact, and it's more of her opinions based on the things that she went through and not the reality of the situation. And she did a lot of, for example, she talks about workers in Oklahoma because she immigrated into the United States and lived in Oklahoma. And she basically called everybody who lives in Oklahoma lazy and deadbeat and not really worth anything. And so why would you give those people jobs when you can give an immigrant a job? And I found that very hypocritical because she's saying everybody is prejudiced against these immigrants and they make all of these unjustified assumptions about them. And here she is making wildly inaccurate assumptions about the people who aren't immigrants, which I feel like is just as bad as having an unbiased, or not an unbiased, but an I guess justified view of a certain group of people just based on where they're from. And so I found the whole thing to be hypocritical. I didn't find the writing to be that captivating. This was just a total miss for me. In fact, it's maybe 1 or 2 stars. Not worth the read in my opinion. And it just wasn't coherently strung together. Then we have, and this is probably my most disappointing. I had to look at what I actually ranked them because a lot of them were very closely tied, but we can't have ties. And this is The Ice at the End of the World by Jon Gertner. I was debating between putting this dead last and 5th. And I went with 5th because I didn't hate it, right? Here's the thing with this one. The first half of the book and the second half of the book are vastly different. It really should have been two different books, and I feel like this is where this suffers. The first half of the book is about the exploration of Greenland by Americans, the Dutch, the Brits, the France, and the history that Greenland played in, say, like World War II, and that. One, this author he wrote very negatively about Americans, but he didn't write negatively about any of the Europeans, which was vastly inaccurate because, so one thing he criticized the Americans for specifically was for selling alcohol and cigarettes to the native Inuits of Greenland, okay? It's a known fact that every group that explored Greenland in these times traded with them these same objects, and he only criticized the Americans. So that to me was very, I hate when authors do that. They write a very biased book when it's centered around multiple groups of people and they don't have those same critiques about others that did the same thing. I wouldn't have a problem if he was critiquing all of the explorers and countries for basically changing the lives of the Inuit people and bringing them these toxic substances, but it was only the Americans, so that bothered me. I also didn't find the history to be that interesting. It wasn't anything that I already, except the World War II bit, I would say he didn't really bring anything new to the table from what I had already known about Greenland. The second half was more about the science and how studying Greenland and specifically glaciers has impacted science. I happen to be somewhat knowledgeable in that, so I didn't find that to be a huge learning experience. And I wish that he delved more into that, because he does go into how the study of the ice actually shows climate change over time. And because he spent so much on the exploration time point, the author didn't get to explore as much of the science, and to me that was far more interesting. And I feel like it's hard to find the right audience for this book, because I feel that there are going to be people who only want to read the exploration bits and the history bit. And then there are going to be people who are more into the science and the impact that the studies on Greenland's ecosystem and its greater implications that data shows to what we're experiencing worldwide in terms of climate change. So that's why this was disappointing. It wasn't bad, but it was also kind of dry. It wasn't very entertaining, and I don't really like when my nonfiction reads like a textbook unless I'm trying to read a textbook, and I didn't sign up for that. Now, the next two books, I had a little bit harder of a time distinguishing which one was better. I ended up putting in the fourth spot, No Visible Bruises, What We Don't Know About Domestic Violence Can Kill Us. I enjoyed what the author was trying to explore in the terms of, I'm going to call it an epidemic, although maybe people won't agree with that, of domestic violence in the United States. And she does talk about other countries, but it is a U.S. journal. The writer is a U.S. journalist, and so her perspective comes from studying this in the United States. And it is everything from how law enforcement handles it, the progression over time to how we identify symptoms, what the victims feel, why somebody who is violent against family members might be that way, exploring their past, and things like that. The landscapers at my apartment are mowing, and I really don't have any other time to film except today and on the weekend. So hopefully that's not too much. Oh my gosh, they're so loud. Okay. This read like a textbook. That's one of the things I didn't like. And also, she focused a lot on preventing the homicide. more on than how we can prevent domestic violence or how we can identify domestic violence and help those people. She was more on preventing the deaths. And the thing about that, the focus that bothered me was that even the people who aren't killed in domestic violence are still affected. Their entire lives are affected going forward. A lot of people will experience PTSD. If you're a victim of domestic violence, you can then become a perpetrator of domestic violence. And I just wish that it would have focused more on how to prevent it, how we can educate individuals on it, the signs to look for, how to offer help, how to make these people who are experiencing this feel safe enough to leave that situation, to give them options, what options they have, and how to help these people without these people feel like the victims feeling like they have no control or that their life is over, and the things that they would naturally feel. This wasn't bad. I do think it's worth the read if you're interested in the topic, or if you maybe suspect you know somebody who is a victim of domestic abuse and you're wanting to just become more knowledgeable yourself, so maybe you can have some extra tools or know where to turn to help people. I wanted more. That's really what it comes down to, is I wanted more from this. And the one I put in the number 3 category isn't necessarily a better book, but it was far more entertaining and captivated more of my attention. And I found it more enjoyable, which is 5 Days Gone, The Mystery of My Mother's Disappearance as a Child by Laura Cumming. And actually, I do feel like these books were an interesting read. Like, if you could read them back to back, I feel like I would read this first and then read this second, because I do feel like I benefited from reading it in that order. Like, I think I got more out of this book because I read No Visible Bruises, if that makes sense. What I didn't like about this book is it had so much setup. Unnecessarily. I would have enjoyed this book if it was 90 pages. It could have chunked out 150, 100 pages, and it would have been better for it. From about, let's see, I know when it actually started getting interesting. Okay, this chapter called The Agreement, which is chapter 10. So the first 172 pages, worthless, too much. You could have summed it up in 10 pages. But the last, from 173 to the end, was absolutely phenomenal. If you like true crime, if you like mysteries, what happened to this? Basically, this follows a woman's daughter who is helping her mother piece together her life. Because her mother might not be who she thinks she is, her family maybe isn't who she thinks they are, and she went missing for I think it's 5 days or 7 days as a child, and then miraculously showed back up unharmed, right? And it unravels that mystery. And that bit was very well executed. And I want to read more from Laura Cumming if she was to write like a fiction book, because the way she unveiled what happened and the order she did, the suspense was there. It was a complete page turner in the second half of the book, and I loved that. I just didn't like the first half because it was too much. Like, come on. Now, my next two, so my last two. So in second place, which one did I ended up? Okay, I did end up giving it to this one. Is How to Be Antiracist by Ibram X. Kendi. And I thought I wasn't going to like this as much. And the reason I thought I wasn't going to like it is because most books in this nature are very preachy. This is, but not to the extent that I thought it was going to be. And because of that, I liked it a lot better than I thought I was going to. I feel like I'm a better human being because I read this. I grew as a person. There are things that I didn't like. And it's going to sound petty because of the topic. But he gives a lot of definitions of various terms. And it's almost like he's lecturing a class. The parts I liked were his individual experiences and his journey of seeing his own prejudices and also being frustrated by having people's negative prejudices and how that affects him as a person because of his skin color, and then the ones he had of people of different skin colors from him and also who have the same skin color but are maybe of a different ethnicity. And his own hypocrisies, he really fundamentally breaks down his own thoughts and his own journey and how he got from point A to point B. That's the thing I liked. I didn't like the whole formal, let me lecture you on what the definition of racism is, what the definition of anti-racism is, what an anti-racist policy is versus what a racist policy is. I didn't need the definitions. I grew because of seeing his experiences and being able to not necessarily relate to that because, I mean, I'm white, right? But it made it so much more human seeing these things from his eyes. And it allowed me to sit there and analyze my own views, why I view that, challenge my own views, and start to see ways that I can improve how I interact with people, especially people from different cultures. This is worth the read. It is a frustrating read. It is a hard read. But at the end of the day, I think it's worth the read. I just wish it wasn't so preachy and definition-y. But the parts that aren't are worth that frustration that I had, if that makes sense. He does write a little dryly, but his writing is very concise, and I do like concise writing. That leads me to my favorite book, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. I almost feel guilty having this as my number one book when I feel like because of the topic, it should have been this. But just based on pure enjoyment, it is Savage Appetites, 4 True Stories of Women, Crime, and Obsession by Rachel Monroe. This is not a perfect book. If I had to give this a star rating, it's probably 4 stars. So nothing was a 5-star rating. Because, to an extent, she was all over the place. But I found the subject matter to be absolutely fascinating. What she does is she takes a look into everything that's associated with crime and murder in regards to women. She delves into women as victims, women as perpetrators, although women don't tend to be perpetrators. Like, statistically compared to men, don't tend to be as numerous in violent crimes. And then women's obsession with violent crimes. So, she talks statistically about how women actually watch more true crime and consume more true crime things than men. The amount of research she had to do to produce this is, I can't even imagine the amount of hours she spent researching. It was just an incredible wealth of knowledge. And it was just fascinating because she literally only focused on women. Oh, and also women in the terms of their role in police forces and detectives over the period of time. So how that's evolved. This is like a guilty pleasure. when I'm thinking about this compared to like a hard-hitting topic book, this got my number one ranking purely because of enjoyment. It was very easy to read. It was very approachable. You don't have to have any knowledge in the subject because she explains it to the most unknowledgeable person in the room without making anybody feel like an idiot. It was disturbing. It was gross in a very satisfying way. And maybe that makes me sick. But, like, I enjoyed it. But I also enjoyed true crime and mysteries. And I like watching 60 Minutes and 48 Hours. And so this really just tickled all my boxes in terms of enjoyment. Like, I read for fun. And I read to learn things. And this did both. And I loved it. Which gets me into, I hope you guys don't mind a rambly video, but I didn't know how else to do this. It gets me into the ones that are moving on. And he didn't put these in a specific order, so I don't know how they ended up ranking. But the books moving on are, much to my disappointment, The Ice at the End of the World by Jon Gertner. I'm going to have to watch. I hope other people make videos on why they ranked the books the way they did, because I'm very interested to see why this moved on. Because I just, totally missed the mark. Totally missed the mark. And one moving on that I'm really excited about is How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I'm sure I pronounced the first name wrong. This is great. And out of the ones moving on, if you could only read one, to me it's this. The last one moving on is No Visible Bruises, What We Don't Know About Domestic Violence Can Kill Us by Louise Snyder. Again, I can understand why this moves on. It just didn't have everything that I would have wanted. But I can appreciate where other people are coming from in terms of like why they would have ranked this high enough for it to move on. The one I'm disappointed in that doesn't get to move on is Savage Appetites by Monroe. It was, oh my gosh, pick this up. Maybe don't read it at night if you get easily like creeped out and like will lose sleep. But I had no problem reading some of the gross bits and then like sleeping, Didn't affect me, but I loved it. If you have like a true crime book club or if you're just kind of like into that kind of thing, I can't imagine anybody not liking this. And then don't buy this one, right? Get it from the library, borrow it from a friend, skip the first 9 chapters, and just read from like chapter 10 on. That's my advice. And then it would be very interesting to know if you guys have read any of the books and if you agree or disagree with me. And if you disagree with me, I want to know why. Because I do think our own personal experiences in life affect whether or not we like certain books. And yeah. So I will see y'all later. Bye, y'all.